Welcome to the video, my precious princesses, my wonderful knights, and fabulous beings. Today we will continue to read Blood Bond by Lady's Days. We are currently on chapter 5. If you haven't heard the other chapters, please do so. If you would like to read this for yourself, I shall leave a link in the description below. The tea sat untouched atop the table. What used to be a hot beverage, now lukewarm. You sat between two males, one glancing out the window with his usual nasty scowl, the other silently glancing at his connected palms in his lap. You cleared your throat, making each boy glance at you slightly. You looked at them both, seeming to say, either drink the tea I made or start talking. Bakugo rolled his eyes, obviously not feeling obligated to give you any sort of story. Midoriya, on the other hand, seemed to feel like he owed you something. He had kept his huge secret from you for a while, and with Kachan's return, you didn't even get to find out properly. I'm sorry. I meant to tell you earlier, but never knew when would be a good time. He sighed, reaching out and taking a long sip of the tea, the warm drink cooling down his nervous mind. Midoriya, what are you exactly? You began. I never told you, but my father is a hunter. I know. My former master and I were aware of him, and for the most part, we kept on good relations. Only a damn nerd like you would be friends with that obsessive maniac. Bakugo finally spoke up, casting a side glance at Midoriya. Bakugo, hush. Unlike you, Midoriya wants to talk. You shut down the angry boy. Midoriya, please continue. I could really care less about your relationship with my father. But at least tell me exactly how you're the same age as Grumpy Fangs here, if you're not what he is. And what is Kachan? Bakugo narrowed his eyes, shaking his head at the male. You sighed, seeing as you were suddenly some mediator between these two. A job you definitely were not happy about, but if it kept things civil here, then you'd put up with it. It's not my place to say, so if Bakugo doesn't want to, I won't force him, you mumbled. Noticing Midoriya quickly pass a glance at your neck, he was a smart one. He'd figured it out. Well, what the fuck are you, Deku? You were one of the weakest humans when we were kids. Midoriya sighed, deciding he might as well come clean. I'm an alchemist. Or at least one who played against the natural law of things, as a result, became cursed. Bakugo leaned forward suddenly, now drawn into the conversation by this little detail. You watched as the male, in his haste, nearly spilled his untouched tea. Whatever Midoriya had said seemed to clearly catch his ear. Don't you fucking tell me that damn book was real! Yeah, after you left, I met Toshinori. Together we made a philosopher's stone and, well, you can guess what happens afterward. You klutzy-ass nerd. Bakugo clicked his tongue. You're still as fucking stupid as when we were 4. If you two don't mind, you broke in. How about you explain your relationship from the beginning? I'm a bit lost. Of course, I'm sorry. We're being rude to you and your hospitality. Kachan, do you want to tell her, or should I? I never wanted her to know, so you might as well tell, since this is your fault, bastard. Midoriya shivered and frowned, looking glum at this interaction. He remembered Kachan being rough and mean, but he seemed to want nothing to do with him. Maybe that was why. We were born in the same village, a time when Japan was at war with each other. Today, many historians call it the Sengoku period. Due to all the war, death, power struggles, and social change, 1578 was near the end, but was also during the worst of it. Growing up, our village's men were always sent off to fight for our village leader. Kachan and I used to always try to sneak into samurai practices and try the moves ourselves. Neither of our families were eligible for us to become warriors, but as boys, we tended to dream a lot. So, the two of you were natural humans over 400 years ago, you mumbled. This idea new to you? Yes. Kachan was born in April, and then in July, I was born. We lived near each other and thus became good childhood friends. We'd play ninjas and samurais, get into all sorts of trouble, and always try to get our hands on European goods. Which is how I started learning alchemy in the first place. One day, a training merchant dropped this old book out of his cart and, well, I kept it. It was filled with so many symbols and characters I'd never seen. By the paper, it was obviously European. So, what happened? How did you both become what you are now? You coaxed the biggest question out of them both. Simple, Bakugo finally added to the conversation. When the country is at war, people do terrible fucking things. His hand gripped his forearm tightly, the skin being cut off from blood flow. You frowned, not wanting to push either. It seemed personal. The rival village set ours on fire. Kachan had taken me out into the woods so he could practice with our wooden swords before it happened, and when we smelt the smoke, we rushed back, but it was too late. No one was left alive, and the evidence was burning. We were 7. Our houses, clothes, parents, everything. Gone in what was supposed to be an afternoon of me beating the shit out of him with my sword. And then, for 7 more years, I was stuck with him. Bakugo rose from his seat, the sound creating an uncomfortable vibration in your ear. The ash blonde huffed before he turned and walked into the back room. Midoriya and you watched, but once the sound of the door back to your apartment complex sounded, it meant he was gone. I'm sorry, Kachan's always been like that. He's never really liked me, Midoriya laughed awkwardly. And he especially started to really dislike me after I followed him everywhere. I don't think he's ever forgiven me either. For what? That day, when our homes caught on fire. He wanted to go and find his parents, but those monsters were still running amongst the flames, and I was so selfish. So I decided that I wasn't going to let Kachan go either, and so I dragged him, kicking and screaming, away. And then, once I let my guard down enough, after 7 long years of traveling with him, always acting like Kachan's shadow, he never came back. I asked him to get firewood, he left. The only thing I ever found of him was an axe and his sword. I feel bad now, though, because for the longest time I thought he left me, but now I think it might have been something else. Something I never considered or connected in my head until now. Midoriya sighed, looking at the swirling leaves of tea in his nearly finished drink. His green eyes fell onto Bakugo's full glass. The tea cold and spoiled, it was truly a waste. Bakugo groaned, tossing another bag into the garbage after having his taste. The damn shapeshifter had literally brought him these unfit blood donations to him just today, and he already had gone through a few of them, all ending in the same way, causing the male to get more frustrated. This just wasn't his day, or his week for that matter. And now with Deku suddenly turning up alive and just as immortal as he was, it was in no way a good ending on such a shit day. He slammed the freezer shut, stomping out towards the living room and collapsing onto the recliner chair. His hands shook from the nerves, beginning to set in, meaning he was starting to experience it once more. It had been a while since this feeling returned, but now it was here, and he was determined to stop it before it's too late. You've been quiet since Midoriya left. You paced into the room, wearing those airy pajamas and running a towel through your damp hair. Shower's free, by the way. Bakugo rolled his eyes, clicking his tongue. Aren't you fucking nosy? He sighed, walking toward the couch and taking a seat on it, looking across the way at the male who seemed to have more than just protecting your shared living space in his mind tonight. His thoughts were elsewhere. His sudden quiet nature telling you he was deep in thought and couldn't be bothered by the usual nuisances, such as yourself. Well, you live under my roof for practically free, you shrugged. And as far as I see it, Midoriya got to get some things off his chest today about his past, so why not you as well, Leech? Why would a white swan like you give a shit about what I have to say, or what kind of past I've had? I'm a monster now, so what does it matter? His bark seemed to be trying to give himself some bite, but his heart wasn't in it. You both could tell this much, and as such, you continued your slight prodding into his personal life and past. Because despite the fact that I was raised to hate you, I've started to realize that maybe not all of you is as bad as you seem. Plus, from what your little group of friends seem to be like, there's a reason you fit into their group, and I want to figure it out. You smiled gently, lips stretching across rosy flesh. Bakugo held his breath, turning to hide his face from such a warm sight. He didn't like the heat much, not after everything. Warm things meant they had a fire in them, and like himself, fire always destroyed. The cold didn't. The cold kept things trapped forever, never letting things change. And when things are the same, then nothing can hurt you. Nothing new came about, and he never had to worry. That was the good thing about being cold. No one expected any better of you. You're fucking annoying. So you've told me, but I really don't care. You shrugged. So, are you gonna pout like a baby, or act like a nearly 500-year-old vampire you are? Red hues twitched at your teeth, a snarl residing deep into the throat of the male. He really didn't like this one. She was much more annoying than her father. While he was relentless in getting his way, never ceasing his attempts, you were much more prone to attempt to pry, and you wanted to be friendly or push away what you weren't. Quite the differing personality attributes. I feel like I'm going to regret this, he breathed out, kicking his legs onto the coffee table. You sighed at his poor house manners, but curled comfortably into yourself as Bakugo began to speak. You could tell by his body language that this was going to be a long story, so you might as well get comfortable. For starters, that damn nerd was wrong, he huffed, running a hand through his untamable blonde locks. I bet he told you I abandoned him or some shit like that. He's always looking for pity, making me out to be the bad guy. And when he's not doing that, he's looking down on me. Well, joke's on him. I'm much stronger than him now. And to top it all off, I never abandoned him. I sure as hell thought about it. Deku was such a tag-along, always a thorn in my side. But fucking hell, he was the only damn person in my life, so I kept him around. But that day, I went out to get firewood, never came back. It wasn't because I planned it, or planned to leave. I got caught. And for 10 long-ass years, I stayed caught. Bakugo, what do you mean? You whispered out silently, trying to understand exactly what he meant or was alluding to. You want all the damn nitty-gritty details, huh? Well, I'll fucking give them to you then, he roared, slamming a hand down onto the leather recliner, a thick slap hitting your ears. Fine, I'll fucking share. But don't say I didn't warn you. It doesn't end well. I'm sure I can handle it. I didn't exactly have a normal upbringing to start, you hummed, mind temporarily wandering to a gray area of your childhood. Can't wait to see you eat those words then, he chuckled dully. So that nerd fucking asked me to go get wood for the fire, and seeing as I could get the hell away from him for a bit, I took the axe and went. The woods that day were shaded perfectly, the overbrush taking out most of the sunlight that tried to pour through the damn branches. It was quiet, and I, at the time, didn't have a care in the world. I had an axe and a wooden sword, so what could hurt me, right? Fucking hell, what an idiot I was. After wandering far enough away, I found a small enough tree and started to get chopping. After about an hour, something in the air just didn't seem right. It felt as if I was being closely watched, observed. I turned around, the small tree falling to the ground after my last chop. I kept the axe near, thinking it might have been a boar or a bear. I was dead wrong, though, as I saw a woman looking out at me. She had come into the clearing, smiling gently at me, as if she thought she could wash away the predatory look in her eyes. It gets a bit fuzzy after that since it all happened so damn fast. One minute she's asking me if I was lost, the next I'm hit behind the back. She questioned me seeing if I was alone, and like a damn fool I gave her what she wanted. The next thing I knew, I woke up somewhere else without anything on me aside from my clothes. To make matters worse, I was tied up. I thought I was for sure going to die. My stupid ass stumbling upon some malicious spirits or cannibals. But I couldn't be farther from it. Turns out, I had been captured by a pair of vampires looking for a meal source. But they decided that instead of tossing me aside and finding another victim, I'd be kept as a private feeding bank. He sighed, scratching a pair of bite marks on his neck, seemingly unaware of his actions. His teeth bit down viciously on his lip, fangs almost drawing blood. You watched sadly, seeing as this story of his was about to become so much worse. And I stayed as their little pet for 10 long years. I nearly lost my mind, always thinking of how much longer I'd last, if they had any more plans for me, when I'd finally be able to die. The chains they kept on me chafed my skin, and eventually my wrists became another area for them to feed. Anywhere the blood started to flow from, they'd take it. And then one day a hunter killed one of them. Killed the other one too, but not before she used me as some sort of hostage, then bit me. She had thought the hunter would attempt to stop the venom she injected me with, but, like all hunters, he was a bastard, and cared more about killing her than saving me. Bakugo's foot slammed against the coffee table harshly, the rage inside his chest cracking the table in half. His foot rested between what was left of your table. You looked at the table and then back at him. His eyes were full of so much hate, so much lust for revenge. I died before he could do anything, and I thought that was it, but a couple hours later, I woke up. Though I wasn't exactly the same anymore, being in both body and mind, I wasn't human anymore. And to make it even worse, I was more thirsty at my reawakening than in my entire life. I was 24 years old and had all the time in the world now. No one to tell me what to do, no limits to what I could do. So I lived by my instincts, fought some assholes, both hunter and creature, and outlived them all. I was better than them all. That's why I'm still fucking here. I wasn't good enough for some shit human, but I am as this. So that's how I live now. No humanity, no guilt, just survival and greatness. What could be better? He smirked to himself, seemingly happy with the end of this little tale. But you didn't fully believe it. There was a slight sadness in the air, one that you were sure he still felt. Maybe Bakugo wasn't completely aware of it, but he still had some unresolved things about his human years. And as you watched him angrily mutter about how you need to buy better furniture to withstand his inhuman strength, you couldn't help but have your feelings begin to shift towards more of an understanding of him. Somewhere in his long dormant heart was still a little humanity left, and maybe that was the part of him that he was repressing, in fear of what he might feel. Does anyone else know about this? You mumbled, shifting your legs slightly on the couch, the aching being relieved by this movement. No, Bakugo spoke back. He sounded stable. It was strange to you, as he practically just confessed to you his last moments as a human, and yet he seemed so calm about it. It was very unlike the male you had come to know this past week. No one? Not even Kirishima or Kaminari? I said no, he growled. I don't fucking like to talk about it. It was a shit couple of years for me. So why the hell would I be telling every damn person I meet? Bakugo. His name rolled off your tongue in such a pitiful tone. Bakugo immediately looked at you, not liking the way it sounded. He didn't tell you his shit backstory to earn your pity. The last thing he wanted from anyone was pity. He wasn't pitiful. And this sure as hell didn't mean anything. And as such, he bared his fangs toward your form. He rose from the chair, his knees slightly cracking from the stiffness he had been left in. I'm out, he muttered, turning and making a dash toward the sliding glass window. What? Where are you going? You asked, following him immediately and grabbing his tense arm. You pulled him away, barely moving his body, however, due to how weak you were in comparison to the inhuman abilities that were bubbly beneath the cold skin your fingers traced against. You squeezed gently, looking at him with worried eyes, something about this behavior hitting you the wrong way. Where was the brash, egotistical, grumpy vampire you had met? The literal blonde rage ball of a man who didn't give a shit about seemingly anything. Why was Midoriya's return in his life such a reason for him to not only become more vulnerable in your eyes, but for his own thick-headedness to put up these walls and pretend he was fine? He may be immortal, but he could still get hurt and feel pain like an ordinary human. Away from you, he snarled, pulling his grip out of your hand, nearly pulling so hard to make you stumble back yourself. But you said, if this crazy girl comes back, you attempted to make up an excuse to get him to stay. It was ridiculous on your part, trying to get him to stay. A few days ago, you had been trying to get him to leave under any circumstances. But now that he was here, and you know that he too, at one point, had been human, something about your view of him changed. He had been hurt, abused, lost, alone. He deserved to feel like he had a place where he belonged and could open up in. He deserved a home, and right now, that's all you wanted to bring him. A place he could see himself in and not feel the need to run away from. If only you were better at picking your words and the way you talk, maybe then you wouldn't have come off as so selfish. Asking such a thing when he obviously needed some space, no wonder he continued to shove you until you had fallen yourself. You hit the hardwood floor with a thud, groaning by how your rear would no doubt be feeling very sore the next day from this sudden crash. Even so, you glanced back up, meeting Bakugo's harsh scarlet eyes, his lips raised and face looking beyond angry. He looked almost like he was ready to end you again. I don't fucking care. You can die, and it won't mean a damn thing to me, he spat, looking at the sliding glass door once more. He tossed it open harshly, the glass thudding against the wall with a loud snap. If it had been any louder, you were sure it would have cracked and sent broken glass everywhere inside the apartment. But he seemed to have gotten lucky and not done such. You watched in silence as he jumped onto the ledge of your small balcony, sending you one last look before jumping into the bleak darkness that hung over the sky. You waited a few moments, seeing if he would come back after he had cooled down. And even when you closed the door again, you kept it unlocked for him to come back in, as Bakugo had a habit of never using the actual entrance to the apartment, and rather used this way. And while you fixed yourself dinner and then watched TV, you never heard the door unlock. And even as you left a note on the outside coffee table for him to knock on the glass when he got back, as you laid your head down to sleep, you had a feeling he wouldn't be back. You could only hope that wherever he ended up, he would calm down enough to come back. You hated leaving conversations with people in such a bad place, as that might be the last thing someone hears from you. Pulling back a hand, the glow of dim white light fading, the male let out a long breath of air. His right side tingles in comparison to the dull left side. It made sense. The useless side of his father was worthless in comparison to the gift of his mother's side gave him. Glancing a gaze down to the bloodied remains below, a silver and cerulean hue met the figure of someone approaching hesitantly. A mop of green poking out from underneath the dim streetlight. The male sighed to his friend, seeing that he had already gotten into trouble, and it hadn't even been an hour since his arrival. "I'm sorry for the mess, but this one had traces of their aura around her," he breathed, clearing off the remaining droplets of scarlet covering his hands with a white cloth. "Why am I always the cleanup crew when you get into town?" his friend sighed, reaching into his bag and getting out an old and tattered book and a piece of chalk. "It's been a while since I've had to do this." "I appreciate your help, Midoriya." The mismatched boy turned his gaze away from the blonde ghoul. "Now on to the bigger issue at hand. How bad is it?" Midoriya paused in his drawing, looking up at the other male. He sighed deeply, feeling conflicted as to what he should say. He had a job to do, but he also had just been reunited with a friend. True, said friend still wanted nothing to do with him, but he was still a friend. "You look like you've seen a wandering soul." Midoriya glanced back up at his companion, seeing timid eyes glossed over with slight worry. The worry for him and the rest of those he kept close. Worry caused by Toga wasn't the only one. "So he's here then? The one that their father was always so obsessed with?" Well... Midoriya, a yes or a no?" "Yes." "Well then, I guess it's a good thing we're both here then. I'd hate to think of what might have happened." Midoriya nodded slowly, almost hesitant so. This was caught by the locks of white and red, casting a suspicious gaze at the male, nearing completion on his circle. "Is there something I should be made aware of, Midoriya?" No, I just had a bit of surprise today." Midoriya watched the man nod, gathering his small bag of belongings as Midoriya's ability cleared the area of any and all marks of a fight and a crime. It looked once more like a completely normal alleyway. Midoriya rose to his feet, brushing off his pants before he realized his foolish mistake and how rude he had been. Looking at the male waiting for Midoriya to show him to the green boy's apartment, Midoriya called out once more. "Welcome back, Todoroki-kun." Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed your time here, please be sure to like the video. If you would care to hear more, please consider subscribing. And farewell for now, my loves.